You know the feeling. You're in a meeting, maybe on the bus, just watching a movie, and someone across the room lets out this huge, deep yawn. And then it happens. You feel it coming. That irresistible, totally unstoppable urge to do the exact same thing. We've all been there, but have you ever really stopped to wonder why?
So let's get right into it, because that simple question, well, it's actually at the heart of a pretty intense scientific debate. For years, the answers seem kind of obvious, right? But it turns out the real story behind the contagious yawn is way stranger and honestly more mysterious than you would ever guess.
First off, this isn't just something in your head. Contagious yawning is a real, documented thing. In fact, studies show it affects somewhere between 40 and 60% of all adults. It's a type of what scientists call emotional contagion, basically an involuntary mimicry that seems totally hardwired into our behavior. So what's really driving it? For a long, long time, the most popular, and let's be honest, the most flattering explanation has been empathy. You know, the idea that we catch a yawn because we're somehow connecting with someone on a deeper, more emotional level.
This is what's called the empathy hypothesis. It suggests that when you see somebody yawn, you're subconsciously picking up on their internal state. Maybe they're tired, maybe they're bored, and your brain just mirrors that feeling. It's a really beautiful idea, isn't it? It turns a simple reflex into this powerful signal of our shared human experience.
And for a while, the evidence really seemed to line up perfectly. I mean, studies showed people were way more likely to catch yawns from friends and family than from total strangers. Researchers also noticed that people with conditions that can affect social processing, like autism, were less susceptible. And to top it off, brain scans showed that seeing a yawn actually lit up some of the same neural networks that are involved in empathy. It really seemed like a closed case. But then, science turned to man's best friend. See, dogs also catch yawns from us, which made them the perfect subjects to really put this whole empathy idea to the test. And what the researchers found? Well, it started to unravel the entire theory. Okay, so take a look at this. If yawning is really about empathy, you'd expect a few things to be true, right? First, you'd predict a dog would yawn more for its owner than a stranger. That's the familiarity bias. But nope. Study after study found no evidence for that. Then you might expect a gender bias, with females being more empathetic and yawning more. Again, nothing. And finally, you'd think they'd yawn more for someone who's nice to them, the prosociality bias, but nope, the evidence just wasn't there. Not a single one of the predictions held up. And this is the bottom line, summed up perfectly by the researchers themselves. After all that testing, they concluded that contagious yawning just can't be used as a reliable sign of empathy, at least not in dogs. This threw a huge wrench in the whole hypothesis. Okay, but what about us? I mean, maybe dogs are just different. Well, a huge human study decided to look at exactly that. Researchers tested 328 people, measuring how easily they caught yawns and also having them fill out detailed empathy questionnaires. And the result? Once they crunched all the numbers, they found absolutely no significant link between a person's empathy score and how likely they were to catch a yawn. So, with the empathy theory looking pretty shaky, a new and, frankly, fascinating alternative popped up. This one has nothing to do with feelings and everything to do with pure physiology. What if yawning is just air conditioning for your brain? This is called the thermoregulatory hypothesis. The idea is that a yawn is triggered when your brain temperature starts to rise. That whole act of a deep yawn, you stretch your jaw, you take in a huge gulp of air, it increases blood flow and uses that cooler outside air to act like a radiator, bringing your brain's temperature right back down. And the evidence for this is actually pretty cool. Just look at this chart from a study done in Arizona. In the winter, when the air was a nice cool 71 degrees, you can see that almost half the people caught a yawn. But in the summer, when the outside air was basically the same temperature as their bodies, that number dropped by more than half. And it makes perfect sense, right? Why would your brain even bother trying to cool itself with hot air? A yawn would be totally useless. So, the brain cooling theory is a really strong contender for why we yawn in the first place. But it still doesn't fully explain why it's so darn contagious. And when scientists dug deeper into what does predict contagious yawning, they were left with a profound mystery. So, after all that research, what did scientists find? Well, that big human study found only one single factor that reliably predicted contagious yawning: age. It turns out, the older you get, the less likely you are to catch a yawn. But here's the crazy part. Even age only explained about 8% of the difference from person to person. Just 8%. Which brings us to this absolutely staggering number. More than 90% of the variation, the reason why you might be a super yawner and your friend never catches one, is a complete and total mystery. It's not empathy, it's not how tired you are, it's not the time of day. We know that how susceptible you are is a very stable, individual trait, but we still have almost no clue what causes it.
So, the next time you see a yawn and you feel that familiar pull, just take a second to think about it. Is it some deep, unconscious sign of a social connection that science just hasn't figured out how to measure yet? Or is it simply your brain's biological cooling system kicking into gear? The honest truth is, we still don't know for sure. And that makes this simple, everyday act one of the most interesting unsolved mysteries of the human body.